Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I want to talk about the shadow side. In the beginning of last year, I felt compelled to get to know aspects of my subconscious mind from a different perspective. For a long time, I had felt that there were things that I was learning in my life, especially when it came to relationships. And even though I felt like I had reached a point where I was doing the things that I thought that was being asked of me so that I can succeed, still I was not. Towards the end of 2017, I was in a relationship in which I felt that my partner and I were going different directions. And I believe that was the result of an energy upgrade. I felt that in the last 3 or 4 years, I was receiving a lot of information from non-physical, and I was getting downloads. I was also doing a lot of traveling, and in that traveling, I was getting a lot of information that was helping me in my growth. Towards the end of 2017, as my partner and I were walking this path, I could see how what I was feeling in the direction that I was taking was not his. And I cannot tell you what feels better, to know beforehand or to know just in that moment when it's happening. To me, I feel that I could see it coming, but yet I was refusing to accept it until it actually was happening. Of course, at this point, I didn't feel that I wanted to stop. I felt more than ever that I wanted to continue and to move on forward as to what was the next thing that I needed to know or the next thing I needed to learn. And of course, I was somewhat troubled and challenged by the outcome of this relationship because I had felt that I was doing everything in my power to make it work. I also felt that since I was a little girl, I was programmed, I was told many times that the only way that I could succeed, the only way that I could achieve the things that I wanted or the average person wanted was for me to follow what other people were doing. And I tried. But the more I did it, the more I felt that something was not right. So about 25 years ago, I started to feel this desire of growing and getting to know myself because my life was quite chaotic. And I met 2 spiritual teachers, and it was my second one that taught me meditation. And it was with my second one that I had a Kundalini awakening, where I was able to have many different experiences about other incarnations and about the spirit realm. But yet, information that you learn, if you don't put it into practice, it just becomes another ideal, another philosophy. And that's what I struggled the most. What I had a difficult time was to be able to put all of these stories together. It's to know why was I having all of these different experiences that I could not, my mind, because it was my mind that was having a difficult time understanding. In the meantime, this relationship factor was always there, and it was always a challenge. So here I've grown quite a bit. I have learned to meditate. I have done many different things to know more of who I was. And with all the experiences that I was having and the connections that I was, receiving from the other side, I still was struggling. So just when I thought that I have found the right person to be in a relationship with, it ends up that 4 years later, we're going separate ways. By this time, I felt like I had learned enough that I thought I'm going to continue in my path and put into practice the things that I've learned. And one of them was the law of attraction. I'm the creator of my reality. So I understood those concepts to some degree. But yet, in my mind, I was thinking I've done in this relationship, everything positive, and yet somewhere along the line, I must have done something else. So this is my opportunity to go deeper within. And this is when the idea of going to Peru came about. Later, I realized that Peru was not just to integrate in the same way that I integrated information when I traveled to other places. This was working with plant medicine. And it was given to me as a form of epiphany or experience when I was in Brazil a few years before in a waterfall. The energy of Mother Earth showed up and she said, we have this connection. And I recognized it, and she basically said, it's time for you to come into my world and understand me better. So of course, once I realized that ayahuasca was going to be the route for me, the energy of Mother Earth showed up to reassure me that I was doing the right thing. That particular night, as I share in my video, I went into an altered state of awareness where I felt unconditional love. And then I had a dream where I saw myself incorporating the shadow. So not until then, I didn't realize until then how powerful my statement was. I had done already some work, and I guess, learning about our shadow side, it's also an aspect of knowing thyself. And I can see that now a year later, because 2018, I was able to do 9 ayahuasca ceremonies. And I decided to stop back in November. I decided that I wanted to take a break because there was so much information given to me that I felt that it was time for me to give some words to them, to that information, and be able to use it. So as you can imagine, I have made quite a few videos trying to vocalize what I've learned with the shadow side, because it was not just about healing that part of me. So it wasn't just about recognizing that part of me, but it was about healing it and also learning what this energy is about. And this is what I want to share with you, because I feel like it really surprised me, the different aspects of this energy, and how a lot of times I couldn't understand why I was creating such a shitty situation where it had a lot to do with how I perceived and understood my world to be. And it goes back to my childhood, because in our childhood is when we are being programmed by our parents, our family members, our society. And one of the things that we are taught is that to admire the minority of people that have been able to succeed in our society and to follow their footsteps. So in other words, we're taking away from the awareness to trust our intuition, our guts, to pay attention to our emotions, and to always be aware of what this minority of people that we see in society as capable are doing. Because the fact that they did it, we can do it too. So in other words, we're being conditioned to be copies of other people. And to some people that works really well. But to me, for me, it never did. I always struggle with that. And for a very long time, I had to just kind of step back and be a silent voice in my environment, because I just did not relate to what other people were doing. And when I spoke my mind, people would look at me weird. So I was always that person where it's just, I didn't make sense to others. And it hasn't been until the most recent times, and I'm not going to say last year, but I would say about 5 years, when I started to see why many of the experiences that I was having was happening to me. But the icing of the cake really happened when I started working with my shadow side, because it relates to our childhood in the way that we are programmed to think and believe. And over time, as we grow older, we start losing our voice. We start numbing ourselves because we want to fit in so bad. So for myself, I felt that the more that my mother wanted me to become the person that she thought I needed to be, the more I struggle. But at the same time I tried, and the more I tried, the more I fail. And of course, once you start realizing that you live in a reality that is a reflection of how you feel and what you think, not until you take a leap of faith and start looking within yourself to what you think, what are your emotions, and how your mind works, you won't change. You will continue to create random acts of misery, where one moment you may attain something positive and you think it's just my luck today, and then the next moment is the opposite. And I knew there was always something deep within myself that it wasn't like that. It wasn't something random. It wasn't something just out of pure luck. I knew there had to be more to the equation. So of course, when I learned about the law of attraction, which I didn't hear about it the first time through Esther Hicks, she channels the energy of Abraham, a collective consciousness. I had heard her many years ago through the Kabbalah. Kabbalists believe in this law. But it wasn't until recent times that it started to make some sense. So, I had to go through that Kundalini awakening about 25 years ago, and had all of these different experiences to actually grasp the concept of an idea. And I've seen now how some of us have to live our whole incarnation to just know one thing and one thing only. So bless those be the ones that can have this ability to have an awakening after another, or I should say a realization after another, because they're able to see energy and information from a broader perspective, not just from the society's point of view. So every time I made a choice that came from me, my mother taught me I was a failure. And over time, I became very rebellious. And what I did was, I chose to move away from home because I wanted to get away from my mother. But her words and her sense of support that she felt towards me, which I know now that she didn't do it to torture me or to harm me. It was just what she was trained to think and believe as well. So she did the best that she could with what she had. And the best gift that she could give me was to show me and share with me that knowledge. And because she comes from a generation that if you don't follow what your elders do, you get punished. I was punished all the time because I just didn't think that what she was teaching me was true. So you can imagine the conflict that I had since I was very young, because at that time and in that point in time, if you didn't follow what you were told, especially in the culture that I come from, you are bitten. You get beat up. You get punished severely, which today it's seen as something cruel, but in those days it's just a way of life, because remember, there is the slavery, and that in the way that people lived in those days with slaves, the way they torture people, a lot of our ancestors have that in their DNA, have that in their mind. So they would try to educate their children by doing similar acts without knowing that act of cruelty. They just felt that they were doing the right thing because they wanted for that child to grow up to be a good person, and by being a good person is giving up their rights of being an individual. So it was like I was trained from a generation in which they were tortured to be something that they were not. So even if they knew that it was the wrong thing to do, they had to do it because it was ingrained, it was hashed into their brain by force. Now, of course, in my generation, things were changing. They were changing fairly quickly, but not fast enough for my parents to see the change. So they had already closed the doors to new ways of thinking, new way of doing things. So their main concern was that I was training the same way they were. I came very, very ahead of my time. And I was always told that as a child. But I didn't know any better. I just felt like everybody was like that. So, in other words, my shadow started to form from the results of having this words, in my head of not being good enough, or being cruel, or not being a good daughter, because I was not following my parents' desires and beliefs. So when I ran away, there was a lot of anger in me, but those words were already inside of my head, and already all of these conversations and voices in my head were already coming from a place of a shadow side. Because, as you will know, or you may not, your mind was created to protect your personality. And if you have a trauma, what the mind is going to do is create a story around that to protect you. Doesn't do it to harm you, does it to protect you. But over time, as you have new experiences, anytime that you may feel threatened and your nerve system goes into a state of fight and flight, which a lot of times the mind doesn't let you know, but you feel it, and it could be at a very subtle level, right away the mind is going to go into the archives of your memories, and it's going to bring something similar, and it's going to create a story to make you believe that you're safe. And a lot of times, if anything, most of the time, those stories are not true. But we buy into it. Why? Because we haven't really understood who we are. We haven't learned that we're not just this physical body. And we've been trained to believe that we are. And that we have a physical mind that is capable and suitable to give us information about the choices that we can make. But what we have not really understood is that our physicality is only 1% of who we are. Because there's another part of us that is 99%. And please don't get caught up in the numbers and the percentages. I'm just using them as a form of understanding. But the 99% of who we are is non-physical. And it's more expansive. And it has access to all kinds of information. So that says then that we're not just one thing and one thing only, that we are a composition of two things. Two things that think differently, that behave differently, and that work differently. So when I started to see my shadow, I started to see how that anger that I had because I was being told not to trust myself by calling me a failure. And no matter how much I run away from my mother, as I went into the world without being fully prepared to be independent, to learn how to, do things on my own, I became prey to other situations that then supported that initial voice of my mother failure. So I started to fail, but there was still too much fire within me and too much anger to give up. So in some ways, I would try to do everything that my mother didn't want me to, just so that I can prove that I could do it, but also as a form of anger to despise her. Where ultimately, doing things in that way, it drove me to start really failing. The turning point was when I had my first daughter, and I found myself talking to her and behaving with her in the same way that my mother did. And at that moment, I remember having a voice saying, "Is this really who you want to be? Because the one thing that you've hated the most about your mother, now you are." That's when things started to take a different turn, because I realized I don't want to be like her. And maybe right away I was not really in that place of I want to find a way that is going to be the better way for me, and ultimately is going to be the better way to everyone. But I did know that I didn't want to be like her. And I think that a lot of us can relate to this when we have this anger built up. We don't want to be like our parents. But because of our shadow side, we don't see how a lot of times we end up being just like them. So that thing that we resist the most is the thing that we become. And we then are in denial because we've created by then this shadow self that does not allow us to see it. And it's not that it's not happening, because there's plenty of experiences that I've created to reflect where I was coming from emotionally. But in many of them, I would blame others for what was happening to me. It wasn't until I took responsibility for my own actions that I started to realize how much I was contributing to this mess. And it wasn't until I had decided to go deep in my subconscious self that I started to realize how powerful is the mind and how much trouble it can get you without even we knowing, without being aware of it. I know that when ayahuasca came into my reality, I was being led to. And I know there are many other people that are doing, and they may have different choices. But to me, I was led to do this work with her. And now I can see why. Now I can understand. In the beginning I didn't, but now I see. This experience with this last relationship, I couldn't understand either why I had put myself in a place that it felt like I was jumping to the fire on my own. I created that. It's like I knew that I could see that this was not the greatest opportunity, but yet I chose it. But now I can see why. I needed to go through this, and maybe I didn't have to, but I chose it so that I could finally move through the right door and have the expansion or the understanding that I have now. And it was about learning about my shadow side. And yes, it started in my childhood. And my inability to trust my intuition and to address my emotions, my anger, my disappointment, and my resentment started to create this energy that as I grew, it became and personalized. It became a force. Now, because we are not just individuals that are a world of our own, we're connected to everything. My shadow side and everybody else's create a vibrational field that we all join that side when we are emotionally vibrating denser energies, denser emotions. So again, when I was feeling confused and disempowered, I had emotions that supported that, and by avoiding how to address them, started to create a vibrational field in my subconscious mind that later became my shadow side, and that shadow side grew to be sometimes dark entities that would come and manifest at certain times in my life. It would attract other dark entities, me being able to open many doors and see denser forms of spirits, attracting them into my reality and creating a lot of relationships that would eventually lead me to a dead end. But it was because these words of failure were so ingrained deep within myself that I even got to the point that I thought the more I help others that cannot be helped, the more worthy I feel. So I was validating my worthiness through other people that could not be helped, because I now can see that there are many people out there that cannot be helped because they need to learn their lessons. And we're not here really to fix anyone, because nothing is broken. We're here only to help ourselves to expand and grow. And as we live our life through those experiences, we become example to others. And there's no better teaching than being an example to another person. Because when things are good in my life, everybody wants to know. When things are not, everybody runs away. I'm sure you can relate to that as well. So, as I looked into my shadow side and I looked at the shadow side of other incarnations, the collective, my ancestors, and at some point I will make a video about honoring our ancestors, because I had also a year before started to feel like I needed to do that. In my culture, I come from Cuba and they don't believe in that. That was lost. And I started to feel there was something in there. And now I could see why. We inherit not only the victories, but the challenges of our ancestry. So whatever we're trying to overcome right now as part of our family, we are overcoming what your parents couldn't. So teaching our children what is really going to help them will not take place until you yourself expand and grow. Now I can see that, but it's taking me all this time. I guess it's better late than never, but now I can see my daughters growing up and I could see the disconnection, which is something that happened with my parents as well, because they didn't teach me to honor my ancestors. But as I was doing this work, I saw their challenges, and then I saw the dark side of Mother Earth and how we contributed to that. And the only way that now we can fix it is through one energy, which is the energy, the highest vibration of all energies. And I've been hearing this over and over and over, but it wasn't until I saw my shadow that I fully understood. And it wasn't until also I was able to do my first ayahuasca ceremony that I had this incredible lesson of love, about the love energy, that I understood how to work it. Because I had heard many times love fixes everything, conquers anything, and yet I felt, why, if this is true, I am failing in my relationships? Where do the virus of disappointment gets in? How do things start turning dark, where two people that come together so willingly then are so willingly to move away? Why is the love taken away when I am not behaving in the way that somebody else expects me to behave? So all of these questions would come up. Why is it that we're not capable to love unconditionally, even when the person is not giving us what we want? To give answers to all of that, I had to see my shadow. I had to be in it. And I'll tell you, I did 2 ceremonies. I've done 5 ceremonies locally and 4 in the jungle. My first ceremony in Peru was the darkest of all. I experienced the darkest night of the soul. It was the most difficult thing I ever done in my life, but the most rewarding, because that's when I was taken to that reality. And this is where I would like to take the time or the moment to say thank you to all the people that, with their unconditional love, supported me throughout that journey. Because if they didn't, I would have lost myself in it. My personality would have been fragmented. It was that dark. And no wonder there's so many people out there doing ceremonies, and because they haven't been prepared properly, and they don't understand that they can in these ceremonies, what they're doing is shadow side work, that they get scared away because they have a bad trip, a dark trip, and here they go with the best interest, but they're not being well informed, and then they move away feeling completely afraid. And some people, even, they may leave with an entity that is not theirs, and some people die. I know they don't like to talk about this, and I'm not saying this to scare you, but some people do die. So we have to be a little bit more informed and aware that, you guys, whoever chooses to do ayahuasca, you're doing shadow side work, because you're going into your subconscious mind. The mind is being expanded to receive a lot of information. And if you have not been prepared and trained properly before this moment, you can definitely have a very, very bad trip. Plus, you can have a difficult time afterwards too, because I hear of some people having that difficulty. After that happens, it's like you don't have to do ayahuasca to continue for your mind to expand. It's already been. It's like, imagine when you stretch a pair of socks, quite apart. What happens to those threads? The same thing happens to us. Is that elasticity gets stretched out. It never goes back to the same place again. That's what happens to us. So what do we need to understand, that I felt that it helped me a lot to start the process of soothing the shadow side and shifting and changing it to its natural state? As I said, one is to know yourself first. Know who you are. We are creators of our reality. That is very true. But the thing is, how do we get that into our everyday life? And the best way I can describe it is, as I said, my physicality is only 1%. I have my mind, my physical senses. My mind was meant to receive information. And the memory has been used to have this ability to recollect something, or to be able to learn about something from different perspectives. But we don't have to have memory all the time, nor we have to use it. And this is what I was being shown, that we've learned to do it that way, but sometimes it backfires us, because the mind works the same way as your computer does. It only knows what it experienced. It only knows what you put in it. So when you're having a new experience, if for a moment the mind sees that you are being threatened, your personality, it will dig into the archives, into something similar, and it will bring that emotion so that you can be cautious and step back. Because what the mind is always trying to do is to keep your nerve system calm. So imagine if you live a life of stress. Imagine if you don't have time to chill and relax, and you're always going, and your mind is always thinking. Your nerve system goes in a state of fight and flight all the time. And this is one of the things that a lot of people, I myself feel that I used to struggle, not as much anymore, is that when you go to sleep, you don't know how to shut off your brain, because your brain is continuing to go. So you don't really get to rest. Your body doesn't get to rest. Because your mind and your senses were not made to operate on their own. When you use them in that way, the one thing that is going to happen is the one thing that won't help you. Because when your body is tense, you close all the doors in which you're going to receive information from the bigger part of you, which to some people we know as soul, spirit, subconscious mind, unconscious mind. They're all like different names to the same thing. It's just consciousness. And it's your consciousness and my consciousness from the non-physical perspective. They remain individual, but they're connected because they're connected to the source of all knowing. It's the same thing as you have a wave from the ocean. Even though the wave takes an individual nature as part of the ocean, the same thing happens with our consciousness. So the part of you that has access to all information is the non-physical one, and it communicates to the physical one through intuition. But in order for you to receive that information, you have to be calm and relaxed. When you're not, it shuts the door, because what kicks in is the fight and flight effect, which is there to protect the physical perspective. Another thing that is really important to keep in mind, the mind loves to know a story that from beginning to end, and it wants to know it yesterday. If you notice, people that are always with this concept of time is money and looking at the time, they're always trying to I cannot say it. They're trying to have strategies of how to use time more effectively. But those people, sometimes they end up quite burned out, because the reality is for everyone, but time outside this reality does not exist. So we use time. But if you notice, when you're really excited and you're very inspired about doing something, how time can fly and you don't even feel it, that's because you are in a timelessness state of being, where it's like being able to open a space within a very short period of time, or sometimes a long period of time, but it doesn't feel it. It's just like things are just happening through synchronistically. So it's important to know that your non-physical side loves to communicate and tell you things as you need them. Why that happens, there are many different stories or understandings. But what matters and what's important to know is that it relates in that way. It converts in that way. If you need to know something, you will know it not 1 minute before or after. You will know it right in the right moment. And it's an inner knowing that you don't have to have the mind translated in order for you to believe it. It's that gut instinct that you say, I knew it deep down within myself, and I didn't have to have anyone validate it because I just knew it. That is spirit at its best. So just know that if you don't feel a desire to do something, it's because it's not the right time. It's not the things that you're asking for, they have not synchronized with the right energy for them to come together. And guess what is the energy that makes them stick together? What is the highest energy of all that we got to work with? The love energy. And I've heard many times about love. And yet, I had a very difficult time understanding that this energy of love could fix everything, because in my head, I would think that I would have to feel love. And I had to learn to compare my emotions of a moment of feeling love and a moment that I didn't. So I just thought, if I don't feel it, I'm not that energy. But that could not be further from the truth, because the one thing that I was able to see is that we're made of this energy. We are love. Our physical construct is different degrees of this energy, our whole universe, entire universe. And that's why when you get away from this physical realities and you go into the lighter realms, lighter vibrations, you feel more love. Now, remember that this energy of love also contains information. It also contains sometimes light, and sometimes it doesn't have a light. But it's information. So if you're feeling lighter and you're feeling love, you're feeling more unified. And guess what? You have access to ways of thinking that are way more refined. And it's not necessarily ways of thinking. I should say ways of knowing. You will know things. And your life will be moving from one event to the next. And it's like opening gifts all the time because things are synchronized. And it's as if you are a queen or a king. The energy opens and unfolds in front of you as if it's just meant to be that way. No obstacles. But that's because you're letting yourself flow with this energy. No resistance. When things start slowing down is when the mind that has such a difficult time understanding phenomena, that, it has a very difficult time understanding information that does not recognize within itself, it starts giving you a story of what you shouldn't follow, your impulse or your spontaneity. And it will give you great stories that a lot of times is what talk us out of doing something. So that all ties to the shadow side, because the shadow side is basically the personality that your inner child has created from not being heard or acknowledged. So yes, you could say that your inner child, in a way, is the aspect of the non-physical as it works with a brand new physical body and wants to do its part. It wants to cooperate and, give ideas of how to do things. But then the mind, because it's been given the, upper hand, says no. You got to do it like everybody else, or no, and then it creates these beliefs. And that part of you starts like getting upset. Imagine if you belong to a group of people and every time they're asking, okay, an opinion, share your opinions, and you're going to say yours, you get shut off. And you get shut off, and maybe the first time it doesn't bother you so much. Maybe the second time, maybe a little bit. Maybe by the third time you're thinking, okay, why is it that I cannot speak my mind? That's what happens to your inner child. After time, it just says, what the fuck? I have good ideas, but I'm not being heard. So then it starts misbehaving, just like, anybody would. So what can we do? What can we do to help this shadow side? Give it love. How? In the same way that you would give love to your child when it's done something wrong and you're like, okay, there's consequences, but I want you to know that I love you unconditionally. So all of those aspects of you that have been fragmented from your desire to push away and deny and avoid, they need to be brought together through the energy of love, unconditional love. So accepting that you're love, you are made of love. All of the cells in your body are working and cooperating, working with one another because of this energy. Isn't that wonderful? And that's why when we're having an orgasm, it feels so powerful, because this is the time when the mind surrenders to the act. And all you're feeling is expressing that love, and that love overtakes all of your cells, and that's why orgasms are so powerful. So imagine if you were to do everything in your life by constantly being aware that you're love. You don't have to feel it in order to be it. You're already that. But yes, you do. When you invoke, you use invocations, and you do set intentions, which are very powerful energy, because it just says how clear you are about something. And then the universe responds with that level of clarity. Then things start unfolding in your life in that loving nature. If you have challenges and you come with that energy, okay, I am love, and with love, I want to be able to attract the experience that is going to allow me to grow, you will have them. And of course, you got to remember that your emotions is your guiding system. Power steering. It's your wheel. It's what guides you and it's letting you know that, oh, this path, if it's something that came out not so good, it's not what you want, so you need to change your perspective. But a lot of times what happens is that our mind gets really caught up and obsessed with what happened in the past. And we've been trained like that. This is not something to really blame anyone. It's that we've been conditioned like that. Our ancestors too. At some point, we got off from the knowledge and the wisdom that our ancestors had, that we could learn from them and not do this. So now we are remembering and we are sharing with one another our experiences so that we can make this journey back to what is really meant to be in a powerful way. Not everyone may be in this space, but there are a lot of people out there. So as we share this, it's very helpful because it helps us open our mind and understand better. And maybe this information is not for everyone that comes across to see this video, but it's okay. If it's not for you, the best, my unconditional love to you. You can move on, but there's going to be someone out there that will benefit. So this is the time where we're using the feminine energy, the heart center, to heal ourselves. We cannot really help others until we heal ourselves. And the only way that is going to really be effective, and it can be fairly quick, is through the energy of love. So for those of you who think that you have to do ayahuasca, you don't have to. There's other methods. You got to find the one that works for you. But just know that if you start using love to talk to that part of you that has not been acknowledged or loved for a long time, that with time it will transform. And that little conversation that comes up or that used to come up would no longer be there. So as a result, you feel more unified because you are now reinforcing those walls and those passages of love energy that have been blocked and backed in with shadow side. You would bring them into light and you would reinforce them, and you would feel the power within you, in which now you no longer have to be validated through somebody else to feel good about you. And you're able to make better decisions in those challenging times. There are moments where I still have challenges. It's not like I'm completely free of them. But what is great is that within those moments, I'm able to see how my shadow side is responding, whatever shadow side is left, because I do see how it's shrinking. I also see how I'm helping my mind change. And that's, I feel like, the most challenging time, the most challenging thing, because our mind has created a pattern or a habit to think in a particular way. And I see especially the elderly how they struggle, because in their head, they've learned to believe, I'm too old to change. I'm not good enough, and society has set them aside, and now they're just drowning and struggling with all of the concepts and beliefs they have in their head about their health and their well-being. But they don't want to change because they don't think they can. So our generation and those that are waking up is really our responsibility to, one, as we become aware with this information, to heal ourselves, but also to help those that are struggling. And they may not get it, because, again, I don't feel that I am here meant to help everyone. But through my actions, through my choices, and through the energy of the frequency of energy that I'm creating within my body and my soul, I can see how others that are meant to be helped are being helped. I'm attracting them. So you could do the same. The one last message that I have for you is that this time around, in the way that we're healing, we have to go through the shadow side. I know people think that you don't. There's a lot of people out there that are in the spiritual path and they think that they can avoid this. That is not the information that was given to me. The information that was given to me is that because we're not just healing ourselves, we're healing the planet. As long as we are witness of a planet where the air is contaminated, the food is contaminated, the water is contaminated, we are contaminated, we have not finished our work. And the only way that we can do this work is by healing ourselves. And there are different ways that we can do that, but the one that has to be done and that is definitely going to make a better impact is when we work with our shadow side, understanding our shadow side. Because not until then, we can still create imbalances through our choices. So, we all have our shadow side. Very few people don't, but the majority do. And not until you learn about that aspect of you, you won't feel better about yourself. And the way that you can feel better about yourself is giving yourself love. When you start giving yourself love, remember, you don't have to remember every little experience that you created that has contributed to the shadow side. Sometimes the ones that are relevant and important will show up and the other ones won't. You don't have to know them. There are moments when I have this aha moments where it's like, oh my God, and I don't have to remember, but there are times that I do and it's very helpful. 2, there are different methods. They all work, some faster than others. But please don't choose to do something like this just because you want to get it done and get it done yesterday. You know, are things that are really important. And if ayahuasca is the path, I'm being asked to say to you that there are many shamans and facilitators out there that are doing this work and they don't know what they're doing. Can you imagine 40, 60 people in a room purging their darkness and they're not able to transform all of that energy that goes into that sacred space because the shaman cannot, one shaman, 2 or 3 cannot change that much, that, amount of darkness. And I've seen this, in my last 3 ceremonies, I was given the vision and the opportunity to learn about these energies and what they represent and their faces. And I mean, it's crazy. But what I saw was that even after the ceremony was done, there was still people purging and the shaman couldn't see it. So if you're going to do this, make sure that you find somebody that you trust, and also remember that your love energy, and before you purge physically, you do a vibrational purge. And as you bring the consciousness of unconditional love, you can then assist in the process of shifting that energy. We have to be grateful to these vibrations because it is through them that we're learning about who we are. We're remembering who we are. And that's what these energies told me, that they want to go home just like we do. We all have that innate desire to find home. Where is home? And home is that love that we feel when we are closer to our Creator. They want the same. And because we created those imbalances, we have to now bring them back into light. So, in other words, this is a time of transformation in which we're giving light to everything that has been dark. And your subconscious, your unconscious mind is an aspect of that. Very important time, my friends. This is a time where we're purifying our mind. We're teaching the mind new ways of thinking without having to create so much suffering. We're already done. We've taken all the choices and all the doors. We've crossed all the doors to those realms. We don't need to do it anymore because we already know where it gets us. So this is a time where we really are going to remember and create, but create from a place of love. If you have any questions, you can email me at createharmonywithlove@gmail.com. You can leave a comment if you like. Until next time, my unconditional love to you. Thank you for listening.